The teacher's lounge. The students filed down the hall toward the playground door. Bradley walked with his hands in his jacket pockets, eyes on Duncan's head in front of him. Did you hear what the teacher was trying to feed us, Dunk? He said. That new math made no sense at all. Math never makes sense to me, Duncan replied, but I'm telling you, something strange is going on. The teacher is teaching us wrong things. I don't mean like in the old days when teachers taught that the earth was flat or that the sun traveled around the earth. Back then, they didn't know any better. No, Mrs. Gross is teaching us wrong stuff, and she's doing it on purpose. Come off it, Bradley, said Duncan. It's recess time. You're supposed to forget about learning and teachers for 10 minutes. Bradley, however, was in no mood for playground games. He slowed his pace to let the rest of the class go on without him. As he passed his last year's classroom, he looked in longingly at Miss Purdy, the greatest teacher in the world. Why couldn't all teachers be caring, smart, and funny like Miss Purdy? His former teacher must have just told one of her great jokes because a blast of laughter came out of the room as Bradley moved down the hall. How can some teachers be so kind and others so crabby? He asked himself. Something strange is going on with my teacher, and I'm going to find out what it is. At the drinking fountain, he took 3 slurps of water. He nodded to the janitor who was washing sponges in his small room that smelled of ammonia. Farther down the hall, he stepped into the library to say hello to the librarian in his soft library voice, then waved to the school secretary through the office window. He stopped before the next door. The black words stenciled on it read, Teacher's Lounge. I've passed this room hundreds of times since kindergarten, but I've never been inside, Bradley said to himself. In fact, I've never seen any kid go in there. He put his ear to the door. Hearing nothing, he leaned forward and the door opened a crack. He checked up and down the hallway, then slipped into the room. What struck Bradley first about the teacher's lounge was the mess. He made a face at the counters cluttered with wads of paper towels, styrofoam cups, thumbtacks, half-eaten bagels, newspapers, coffee grounds, eraser crumbs, broken crayons, felt markers, pencil shavings, cupcake wrappers, gold glitter, and reams of paper. Look at this dump, he said. Teachers tell us to keep our rooms clean. The room smelled of coffee and magic marker. A 5-gallon coffee maker hissed on a table. Announcements about substitutes, assemblies, parties, and special meetings were scribbled on a large whiteboard. In one corner stood an impressive-looking Xerox machine. Bradley lowered his face onto the class top and pressed the copy button. Out came a picture of his squishy nose and cheeks. I've always wanted to do that, he said. With a blue felt marker, he wrote, I was here on the paper and left it on the counter, certain that no teacher could recognize his mashed face. On the back wall of the room hung a map. It showed a peanut-shaped island, and the extraordinary words printed along one side caught Bradley's immediate attention. Apple Island, our home. Population, 2,000 teachers. Apple Island, he said aloud. Is that map for real? How could there be an island inhabited only by teachers? Suddenly he heard voices in the hall, and the door began to swing open. With the lightning reflexes that had won him many games of Foursquare on the playground, he dove under a counter. He curled up by a stack of old textbooks just as 2 pairs of legs stopped inches from his face. One pair of legs, thick with black knee socks, Bradley recognized at once. His mouth the words, Mrs. Gross. The second pair was a mystery. Though her thick nylon stockings, he could see that this woman's ankles were stained purple. The woman with purple ankles spoke first. So, this is it, Miss Eraser. Typical school, on a typical school day in a typical American city. Coffee splattered on the tile floor by Bradley's nose. It's been a great honor to have such a distinguished visitor in our school today, head teacher, came his teacher's voice. But please, in this building, call me Mrs. Gross. That's what the students call me. Hee, Mrs. Gross. Indeed, Mrs. Gross, said the first woman, and today it was a super to see typical schoolwork being done by typical small creatures. So, what do you call them again? Children, kids, youngsters, or juveniles. Some are called boys, some girls. At school, you call them pupils or students. Collectively, they are called a class. Whatever they are called, they are messy, giggly things, said the lady with the purple ankles. They know so little. Their heads are filled with nonsense. They constantly ask why, and they never stop fidgeting. Some squirm in their chairs even when the teacher is giving a beautiful long lecture, and these juveniles get excited at the silliest things. I observed one boy on your typical playground chase a butterfly, and one girl squeal with delight when she caught a lizard. Ridiculous! But that's the beauty of Operation Misteach, head teacher, said Mrs. Gross. Children will believe anything teachers tell them. We can mold them like clay in our hands. So, how did your class react to Operation Misteach on the first day? Beautifully, head teacher, Mrs. Gross answered. Any troublemakers? Only one, head teacher. A whining, sniveling boy named Bradley Zimmerman. He asked many questions. He questioned my answers. Luckily, none of the other students listened to him. They snicker at him. I gave him the old report card threat, and that, I believe, will keep his trap shut. We will have no more trouble from Mr. Zimmerman. So, you've done well, Mrs. Gross, said the woman with purple ankles. I'm looking forward to this afternoon. Shh! Here come the other teachers. The teacher's lounge door swung open. Soon Bradley was peering through a forest of teachers' legs. What was that conversation all about, he asked himself. Who's that head teacher? What's Operation Misteach? What's going to happen this afternoon? With a dozen chatting, coffee-swigging teachers surrounding him, he rested his head on a book and waited for the end of recess bell to ring. The field trip. Back in the classroom, Bradley slipped into his seat. He turned and whispered to Duncan, Something really weird is going on in this school. Duncan shrugged. So it's new, he said. You've been saying that all year. Mrs. Gross, or Miss Eraser, or whatever her name was, stood before the blackboard with her hefty arms folded across her large bosom. Still wearing the unfamiliar grin, she said, Guess what, students? No more schoolwork today. You are in for a big surprise. We are going on a field trip. That's right, our first field trip of the year. A bus is waiting out front for us right now. Don't ask where we are going. It's a surprise. Any questions? Good. Now get your wraps and line up at the door. Any other day, Bradley would have been ecstatic about going on a field trip. Yet after what he had overheard in the teacher's lounge, he slunk to the coat closet, shaking his head full of doubts. Mrs. Gross led her class down the hall with a surprising amount of bounce in her step. Come along, students, she sang out. Oh, you'll find this field trip most amusing. It will be the most unusual field trip any class has ever been on. Come along. The class tramped onto a yellow bus parked in front of the school. As soon as the bus started to roll, they began singing a rousing chorus of 100 bottles of beer on the wall. By the time the bus pulled into the parking lot of a small airport, they were singing, 1 bottle of beer on the wall, 1 bottle of beer. Mrs. Gross stood by the bus driver. Giddy with excitement, she announced, All right, students, we're here. Step right down. Let's get moving. Just wait until you see our big surprise. It's beautiful. Just wait, students. Any questions? Good. Now come off the bus. The surprise certainly was big. At the far end of the runway sat a giant silver blimp like the ones you might see hovering over football stadiums. The great shiny watermelon swayed in the breeze. Sunlight danced along its metallic sides. Attached to the underside was a long cabin that looked much like a modern trailer home. Thick cables tethered the whole thing to the ground. Mrs. Gross led the line of students across the airport runway to the jumbo craft. She stopped at the foot of metal stairs that reached up to the cabin door. Now guess what, students, she said. We're going for a ride. Yes, we are. We're going for a ride in this beautiful airship. Isn't that exciting? Sure beats a field trip to a stuffy art museum or a boring fire station, doesn't it? Come along. Right this way, students. Right up these stairs. Bradley and Duncan climbed the stairs together. And you said Mrs. Gross was a crabby teacher, Duncan said. Well, what crabby teacher would take a class on a neat blimp ride? Bradley said nothing. His eyes were fixed upon the name painted above the cabin door. He took a seat next to his friend. I don't like this, Dunk, he said. Something is not right about this field trip. But Duncan wasn't listening. He was too busy pushing buttons on his armrest and making his cushy chair lean back and forward again. At the front of the blimp sat a woman who appeared to be the pilot. So, everyone aboard, Missy Racer, she said. It took me 20 minutes to fly here this morning, so with the wind at our back, we should be there in much less time. Bradley recognized the voice. It belonged to the lady with the purple ankles. A low hum filled the cabin as the blimp rose off the runway. Out the window, Bradley watched the ground fall away and the yellow bus in the parking lot grow smaller and smaller until it looked like a little toy. The scene turned to slate gray when the airship entered a layer of clouds. As the hum of the engine rose to a high whine, the blimp seemed to pick up a remarkable amount of speed. Mrs. Gross walked down the aisle serving apple pie, apple tarts, and apple cider on a silver tray. Here you are, students, she said in her new cheerful manner. Here are snacks that are good for you. Eat, an apple a day keeps the doctor from pay, don't they say? Now lower the seat back trays in front of you and eat up. Isn't this exciting? Isn't this fun? Everyone takes something, apples for everyone. An apple a day makes the doctor gray, so eat as much as you like. Bradley ignored the food. He sat staring into the swirling world outside the window. His stomach heaved as the blimp started to descend. Now guess what, students, Mrs. Gross called out. We're going to land somewhere special. We're going to get off the blimp and take a walk. Everyone had plenty of apple snacks to eat. Good. Pedagogue 2 emerged from the cloud cover. Now Bradley saw they were flying low over the ocean. With a shudder, he peered forward and saw where the blimp was about to land. At the end of a peanut-shaped island. On the horizon, its tiered sides rising into the clouds like a colossal wedding cake, stood a white mountain. Chalk Mountain, Bradley said, remembering the map in the teacher's lounge. And that's Apple Island down below. We're about to land on an island inhabited only by teachers. Apple Island. The cabin door swung open. The metal stairs unfolded to the ground. Students, Mrs. Gross barked, exit the airship at once. Form a straight line at the bottom of the stairs. The jolly tone was gone from her voice. The scowl had returned to her face. One by one, the members of Bradley's class left the blimp and clumped down the stairs. They lined up silently along a white chalk line outside. Bradley stood at the end of the line. The blimp, he noticed, had landed in the middle of a field, a soccer field. At either end stood a wooden goal. A weather-worn scoreboard read Northern Teachers versus Southern Teachers. Cling, cling, cling! Mrs. Gross stomped down the metal steps, followed by the lady with purple ankles. Silver whistles hung around the both women's necks. With hands clasped behind their backs, they strode to the head of the line. The purple-ankled lady addressed the class. So, my name is Mrs. Goldstar. I'm head teacher of this island. I better not hear any snickering about my name. Nope. And I better not hear any talking in line whatsoever. Bradley raised his hand. Where are we? He asked. What are we doing here? Mrs. Gross sneered at the boy. I told you we were going on a field trip, didn't I? She said. Well, we are in a field, aren't we? And I better not hear any more questions, said Mrs. Goldstar. So, follow us. The two teachers led the students across the soccer field. They came to the start of a road paved entirely with speckled tiles. Nailed to an apple tree at the side of the road was a large cork bulletin board. Attached to the tree across from it were a round gray bell and an intercom speaker. Reminds me of the hallway in our school, Duncan said in surprise. Mrs. Gross spun around. She squinted down the line until her eyes fell on Duncan. Few Halloween masks have been as fearful as the look on her face right now. What did I say? She howled. Do you have eraser crumbs for brains? I said no more talking. That's the last time I will warn any of you sniveling nose drippings. Understand? And do not even think of breaking any more rules while you are here. The class went stiff and silent in a straight single file line. They stepped onto the road. Bradley stared forward. As he passed the bulletin board, he read some letters cut from red construction paper thumbtacked to the cork. Great hallway, mile 0. Below this was a notice written on notebook paper. Rules. No running, no pushing, no spitting, no loud voices, no cuts in line, no saving places, no chewing gum, no rollerblading, no skateboarding, no ball bouncing, no jump roping, no hopscotch. Sneakers squeak, squeak, squeaked on the speckled tiles as the class walked along. The great hallway cut a straight path through a forest of apple trees. Leafy branches reached far out, dangling shiny red apples above the children's heads. Every 50 steps or so, they passed a red alarm box, which the words, in case of fire, break class. They also passed white porcelain drinking fountains, but no one dared get out of line for a drink of water, nor did anyone dare visit little cabins marked boys and girls. Now and then a blue bug with wiggly antennae and long black legs leaped onto the road. Cootie, cootie, the creatures chirped. One landed near Bradley's feet and stop! He quickly put an end to it. He overheard Mrs. Gross say at the front of the line, "Those pests are getting worse here up north, head teacher. Soon this whole island will have the cooties." "I'll order Mr. Janitor to bring the cootie catcher to this area immediately," said Mrs. Goldstar. "Now let's hurry. The bus is waiting." A second cootie leaped toward Bradley, chirping, "Cootie, cootie," until he flattened it like the other. "So we're heading for another bus," he told himself. "I've got to ditch these teachers soon." Fortunately, at school, Bradley had a great deal of practice in escaping from lines. He knew that teachers rarely checked what happened in line behind them, so as the head of the line disappeared around a sharp turn, he slowed his pace. He counted to 3 and dove, landing in a pile of leaves behind a large apple tree. On his stomach, he froze and listened. Hearing no whistle blow, he peered around the tree trunk. "So long, teachers," he said, and with mixed feelings of bravery and fear, he watched his class continue up the road without him. Bradley rose to his feet. Now what? He asked himself. I need some sort of plan. Nailed to the tree was another cork bulletin board. He read the notice thumbtacked on it. Grand Playground, 4 miles. Office Palace, 7 miles. Big Book Building, 10 miles. Teacher City, 12.5 miles. Office Palace, he said. I remember seeing that on the teacher's lounge map. It's at the foot of Chalk Mountain. That's where I should go to get some information. At that moment, he heard footsteps and ducked back behind the tree. Around the corner marched 2 straight lines of teachers, mostly women, a few men. Some wore backpacks similar to the one he wore to school. One woman wore a cardboard crown that said birthday girl on it. 2 men carried lunchboxes. They all had ankles stained purple. This road could be crawling with more teachers, so I'll cut cross country, he told himself. As long as I can find that white chalk mountain, I can find Office Palace. Looking up at the bright sun overhead, he got his bearings and headed into the apple woods. The hiking was pleasant. The air smelled floral and polished like a classroom on a crisp mountain Monday morning. Beneath the apple trees, soft grass that felt curiously like green crepe paper blanketed the ground. Here and there, yellow daffodils sprouted. When Bradley knelt to inspect one, he discovered something remarkable. The flower was made of yellow tissue paper, just like the flowers he had made last spring in Miss Purdy's class. Stretched among the branches of a nearby apple tree was a curious-looking spider web. Long, flat strands, clear and sticky to the touch, formed the web. Dangling from it by another sticky strip was a peculiar plaid spider who moved up and down by reeling the strand in and out of its bottom. Scotch tape, Bradley declared, and I always thought Scotch tape was made in factories. After hopping over a small brook flowing with a purple fluid that looked like pen ink, Bradley watched a snail the size and color of a dirty softball crawl through the crepe paper grass. The trail of cream-colored slime it left behind quickly hardened, and when Bradley pulled up a length of this material, he found he was holding nothing less than fresh masking tape. With the next step, he slipped on squishy fallen apples. His knee smacked something hard and box-shaped that grew on a pedestal like a toadstool. When he saw the lid of latches, he realized what this plant was. A lunchbox. Turning in circles, he found more of these lunchbox mushrooms growing around him. Overhead flapped a flock of extraordinary birds. Blue, red, yellow, and green. They seemed to be made of folded paper in a variety of colors. Origami birds, Bradley called out. For several minutes he watched the birds flitter to and from an apple tree, building a nest out of pipe cleaners. Even the melody the birds chirped was familiar to Bradley, and he sang along. Good morning to you, good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright smiling faces. Good morning to you. Bradley walked on. Soon he entered a large clearing. A low wooden fence encircled acres of fresh green clover. Standing inside the enclosure, munching on clover, flicking their tails and contentedly swaying back and forth were dozens of white cows and an equal number of brown cows. Bradley crouched behind an apple tree on the lookout for teachers. Sure enough, two of them wearing yellow overalls crouched among the cows. Each wore a straw hat. Each had a plastic box filled with the small cardboard cartons by her. One teacher, squatting beneath a white cow, held out a carton and pulled the cow's tail. The cow let out a low moan that sounded like A-E-I-O-U as white milk squirted into the carton. When the carton was filled, the teacher closed its peak top and started filling another. Meanwhile, the second teacher knelt beneath a brown cow. She also held out a carton. To Bradley's great surprise, this cow squirted chocolate milk. A-E-I-O-U. The cow lowed. A-E-I-O-U. So this is where our cafeteria's white and chocolate milk comes from, he told himself. And those are the half-pint cartons that are impossible to open and even more impossible to drink from without having milk dribble down your chin. From his hiding place, he heard the teacher under the white cow say, work, 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 day after day, 8:30 to 3 o'clock. All we do is work. It's not fair. It seems as if recess was hours ago. I hate filling these cartons over and over and over. Boring. Tomorrow, I'm going to play hooky and call in a substitute. How long until lunch? Miss Bulletin Board, stop your belly aching, said the teacher under the brown cow. First, you had a drink of water. Then you went to the bathroom. Then you complained that your stomach hurt and you needed to sit down. You ride the cows constantly and chat with any teacher who passes. We'll never get our job done if you don't stop fooling around. Bradley had heard enough. He moved on.